Exotic Grunt Gaming here, bringing you our review of Mass Effect Andromeda. The reviewer will be Darth Ben 60. And so, to start this off, what are some of your general thoughts on Mass Effect Andromeda?
So, Mass Effect Andromeda was easily one of my most hyped games in the past, few years, easily. And it's a game that delivered on the hype in my eyes. But I do feel vaguely unsatisfied after finishing the game, if that makes any sense. So graphically, I think the game is amazing. Running on my PC, it looked absolutely beautiful. There are, of course, the animation hiccups that are very well covered anywhere online. But besides the animation hiccups, what I did, notice a few. I never felt they detracted from the game in a serious manner. So to me, they were just kind of whatever. Gameplay is easily one of the best installments in the series. It's always a blast to play, always a blast to try new methods to fight people, new weapons and new abilities. And it's a far departure from the last entry in the series, but was much more of a cover shooter, being Mass Effect 3. Along with something else that's great, exploring planets. I never felt like exploring a planet was a chore. Always enjoyed landing on them, always enjoyed exploring them. And that with the gameplay are probably the two best parts of the game. The story itself was decent, while definitely being like, it was presented well enough and kept me engaged, but it was definitely the weakest in the series, and never really had that real high moment like in Mass Effect 1 where you confront Saren, Mass Effect 2 going on that suicide mission, or Mass Effect 3 just opening up with the Reaper invasion. Never had that moment that was like had a moment similar at the end that was very action oriented and very flashy, but I didn't feel as emotionally attached, as I didn't really feel like there was going to be any consequences to it. I feel like I knew what was happening, knew what was going to happen. And to tie back into my vaguely unsatisfied feeling with the game, it is the only Mass Effect that I did not immediately load back up for a second playthrough. With that, all that being said, I still really loved the game. I feel like it was missing out on some individual soul in the main story. Real quick before we get into your questions, the multiplayer aspect is phenomenal. I have a great time playing it because it focuses on one of the best parts of Andromeda, what is the gameplay.
So, since I haven't spent much time playing single player, like any at all, at the time I didn't have the time to really get dragged into another universe and another RPG single player game. So I stuck to really just playing the multiplayer when we were together playing, and I had a lot of fun with it. There was a lot of content, if you will, in terms of playing with different characters and leveling them up all the way and unlocking those different characters. So I guess my next question would be, how do you feel like in terms of the longevity of multiplayer with the 4 or 5 maps that released at launch, and then having to earn a pack or earn enough credits to purchase a pack to hopefully unlock a new character to play as? How do you feel like that kind of multiplayer economy works, and does it work well for the game? Does it make it feel kind of bare? What are your thoughts on that?
I actually think it works very well for the game. I think there is a good depth of content to the game. The reason why I think it works well is because, you're trying to get each one of these characters up to, level 20 to do gold missions or to fully unlock them. So while you're doing that, you're earning the credits to get new characters and everything. And while there is the microtransaction because, EA made the game, well, produced the game, so it's, of course, going to be in there. I think that it actually works very well for this game because, I actually didn't, I started with the Adept, and I didn't actually unlock another character I wanted to try until I had already hit level 20. So it worked for me. But it's definitely something that I could see detracts. Like, I could see people being upset about it, but I don't think it hurts longevity. If anything, think what hurts longevity is the fact that there's only 5 maps. But I think before the game even came out, they said they were adding more for free. So it's not something that worries. I'd still go play multiplayer right now, and I could spend all day playing it. So
Yeah.
I think it's a good multiplayer. It's very fun. It's the kind of multiplayer I like where it's just very cooperative against enemies, go in there, have a blast.
Yeah.
It's good.
Now, obviously, I think this review cannot go and cannot be finished without raising the question about the facial animation, since that was such a huge, that generated so much noise. And so I wanted to ask you, in an unbiased way, and your opinion on those facial animations, and was it not necessarily game breaking but immersion breaking when you were playing through compared to facial animations pulled from the first Mass Effect 10 years ago that looked almost better in terms of facial animations, at least from the examples that were shown.
Yeah.
What is your in-game experience on that?
Well, it's two-part. It's before patch 1.05
Yep.
and post-patch 1.05. Pre-immersion breaking? No. More just, laughable. And I mean, Mass Effect has always had those moments where, you kind of look at it, kind of just laugh from animations. They've always had animation problems, just hiccups in the game. That face, because I know exactly what video you're talking about, the Mass Effect Andromeda face, Addison compared to Ashley from Mass Effect 1. Yeah, her face was disgusting. And it looked bad, but it was not game breaking, or I would even say immersion breaking. It just looked like she let her daughter do her makeup or something. It looked really dumb. Completely unbiased. Maybe I just didn't pay enough attention to it. Maybe I was just I was maybe trying to be too immersed in the game to be broken out of it. But especially in its current environment, post-patch 1.05, the facial animations like that there's nothing that bad anymore. Sometimes you still get those, glossy eyes, that kind of dead-looking face. But as a general rule of thumb now, it is much better. Her face especially is much better. And I think if you were worried about getting into the game due to facial animations, what I don't think should ever stop you from getting into a game, now is definitely a good time because they definitely fixed it.
Okay, cool. And one of my last questions before I kind of open it to you, just talk about your last and final points of your feelings on the game. You said earlier that you didn't go through a second playthrough right away compared to the old Mass Effects. So how does this size up against the game like Witcher 3, which maybe you didn't go through a second playthrough right away, but is certainly a top tier RPG single player game? How does this size up to something like that in terms of the base RPG elements? And is something like, your lack of feeling that you are making an impact on the universe that you're in, does that have to do with that? It not feeling like you can go back and do a second playthrough?
Well, I felt like I had a huge impact in the universe that I played through in Mass Effect Andromeda. Everything I do had an impact. I affected where people could live and everything. And I see it's a lot like, overall, if you were to compare Mass Effect Andromeda to Mass Effect 1, Andromeda's a much better start to a new trilogy. While it may have never had that moment where I really felt like anything could happen, like confronting Saren, like I said earlier, there, I see so many more possibilities of my actions influencing Mass Effect Andromeda 2 than all these little things that Mass Effect 1 went into Mass Effect 2. There were actions that you see change Mass Effect 2, but even the big thing in Mass Effect 1 where save the council or not save the council, I never felt like that really came into play. So really, like, we're talking about, top tier RPGs. Is Mass Effect Andromeda top tier? No, but I wouldn't put that. I would put that solely on kind of the story and not how the story is presented. I think what they did is they backed themselves into a hard corner of going to a new galaxy and making us care about this galaxy. And what they did by doing that is used a lot of the same stuff they did in the first three instead of kind of going their own way. Because the Ket, without going into too much spoilers, are a lot just like the Reapers. They have and there's some mystery to them, like there always was with the Reapers, but it really feels like you just replaced the Reapers with the Ket, and that went to a new galaxy. And I understand because they didn't want to give a canonical ending to the Mass Effect trilogy. But I think that's really what held it back from being a top tier. Because gameplay was great. Going to these planets, exploring these planets were great. And right there, gameplay and exploration, that's the two major things of RPGs. So the real thing that I think held it back from making me want to go through again was, I feel like while my choices might make a bigger impact in the next Andromeda, I feel like they didn't really make too much of impact in this one. And the story itself wasn't told in a way that I think if I made a choice, anything different would have happened. And I think that's where my I didn't immediately go through again is where that came from.
Where that comes from. So what are some final thoughts, some things that you'd like to talk about that you didn't get a chance to say earlier, and just some final impressions on the game that you would like to, let people who maybe want to try out the game know, who maybe haven't experienced the Mass Effect series?
I would definitely get into it. I mean, it's weird because you compare Mass Effect Andromeda to the whole original trilogy. Mm-hmm. It's impossible not to, because the original trilogy stands together. Before the first one even came out, they said it was going to be a trilogy. So it's hard not to compare Andromeda to 3 games worth of content where you, over 5 years, grew attached to these characters, to these moments, to these places. And as a audience, we're almost expecting all of that from one game, what is impossible, So that being said, I do highly recommend this game. I think it's a great game to play through. It's a great game to play and have fun. Multiplayer is blast. The campaign, while I have said multiple times that it didn't make me want to go through the second time, was enjoyable to experience the first time. Exploring planets is awesome. It's just, do I recommend you to pick up this game? Yes. Would I also recommend you, though, to maybe go buy the complete original trilogy on Origin and play through those? Yes. And I really couldn't tell you which one I would recommend more. And that's the hardest part about saying final thoughts on the game.
Yeah. And I guess my last point, hearing you review some of this and this game and talking about how, people were comparing, really maybe subconsciously comparing Mass Effect Andromeda to Mass Effect as really a trilogy and as a genre, or as its own series and game, comparing one game to 3 games and the universe that was built around those 3 and the lore and the experiences. It's almost kind of unfair to have those reservations coming into playing a brand new trilogy and expecting 3 games worth in one game and expecting to have the same emotional ties when like you said, over 5 years through the first trilogy, you were being drawn into this universe and emotionally attached with these characters and Commander Shepard and the companions and whatnot.
Yeah.
And you can't expect that same amount of effect from just one game, especially when they're clearly saying that this is going to become, the new trilogy is in the Andromeda
Yep.
series. So you kind of have to really judge it based upon how it's going to set up for a new trilogy and how does it do that. And like you said earlier in the review, you said it sets it up almost better than
The
Mass
first
Effect
Mass
1
Effect, yeah.
for a great trilogy. So, yeah, it's just interesting to think about it that way. But, stay tuned for continued Mass Effect Andromeda content.
My final score.
Oh, yeah, final score.
Yeah. I would give it a 8.7. I would highly recommend it as a game. The only thing is, amount of replayability in single player. I think multiplayer has a great amount of replayability. Very fun game. It just, I think I'm biased from the original trilogy, but it's missing that certain element of soul, maybe.
All right, well, for more Mass Effect Andromeda content, just stay tuned to the channel. Darkman60 will be uploading some more videos in the future, maybe some more gameplay, maybe we'll do some more multiplayer content and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But other than that,
That's it. See you guys next time.